when money could not heal a millionaire's daughter. He put his fortune on the line for one miracle. What happened next would shake his mansion forever. Richard Cole sat in the grand hall of his Boston mansion. The kind of house that seemed more like a castle than a home. Chandeliers hung from high ceilings. Paintings worth millions lined the walls, and the marble floor gleamed under soft, golden light. Richard was 45 years old, a tall white man with streaks of silver in his hair that made him look older than his age. His eyes were sharp, the kind of eyes that could intimidate rivals in the boardroom. Yet behind them lay exhaustion. He was a self-made millionaire, once celebrated on magazine covers as the genius who turned small real estate projects into a billion-dollar empire. But all the money in the world could not heal his broken heart. His daughter, Emily Cole, only 12 years old, sat quietly in her wheelchair at the dinner table. She had chestnut brown hair that fell softly to her shoulders, and pale skin that almost glowed under the chandelier light. She should have been running in the garden, laughing like other children, but fate had been cruel. 5 years earlier, a car accident had taken her mother's life and left Emily paralyzed from the waist down. Since then, Richard had spent fortune after fortune on doctors, surgeries, and foreign treatments. Yet Emily remained unable to walk. That evening, as silence filled the dining hall, Richard placed his glass of water down with unusual force. His voice broke the stillness. "I have made my decision," he said. "I will give half of my property, my wealth, my businesses, my land, to the one who can heal my daughter. I do not care if it is a doctor, a healer, or even one of you in this house. If you can give Emily her life back, you will be rewarded beyond imagination." The air froze. The butler, Mr. Harris, an old man who had served the family for 3 decades, nearly dropped the silver tray he carried. The chef peered out from the kitchen doorway, whispering in shock to a younger cook. Even the security guards stationed by the door glanced at one another, stunned. And near the corner of the room stood Angela Brooks, the maid. She was 32, a black woman with smooth, dark skin, strong arms from years of hard work, and eyes that carried both sadness and warmth. Angela had been working in the Cole mansion for 2 years, keeping mostly to herself. She was not just a maid, she was also a single mother, though few in the mansion knew. About the child, she had left with her sister in another city. Angela often cared for Emily more than her duties required. She read her bedtime stories, sang softly when Emily cried at night, and sometimes wheeled her to the garden when Richard was away. Emily trusted her. When Richard made his shocking promise, Angela's heart raced. She looked at Emily, who sat quietly, her hands folded on her lap, her big brown eyes filled with silent longing. Something stirred deep inside Angela. Later that night, as she folded laundry in the servants' quarters, Angela whispered to herself, "Maybe God did not bring me here just to serve. Maybe He brought me here to heal." Angela Brooks lay awake in her small servant room that night, staring at the cracked ceiling. The mansion was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. Richard's words echoed in her mind. "Half of my property to the one who heals Emily." For the others in the mansion, those words meant money, luxury, and power. But for Angela, they stirred something much deeper. Angela was 32, but life had aged her faster. She had grown up in the poorer neighborhoods of Atlanta, raised by a grandmother who believed in natural healing. While her schoolmates played outside, Angela often sat beside her grandmother, learning about herbs, massage, and simple therapies passed down through generations. At 17, Angela dreamed of becoming a nurse. She had the grades, the passion, and the determination. But when her grandmother fell sick, Angela dropped out of school to care for her. Years of poverty followed. She married young, only to be abandoned by her husband when she gave birth to their daughter, Jasmine. Now, working as a maid in Boston, Angela sent money back to her sister, who cared for Jasmine. Few in the mansion knew her story. To them, she was just another maid, someone who cleaned floors and folded clothes. But Angela carried within her something the others could not see. The old wisdom her grandmother had taught her, and the compassion of a mother who knew what it meant to fight for a child. As dawn broke and golden light filtered through the small window, Angela sat up and whispered, "Lord, give me the strength to help Emily, not for the money, but for her smile." That day, as she served Emily breakfast, Angela gently touched the girl's hand. "Do you believe you can walk again?" she asked softly. Emily looked up, her brown eyes shining with both hope and fear. "I dream about it, Angela, every night. But when I wake up, I remember I can't." Angela knelt down beside her. "Then let us dream together. And maybe one day you will wake up and find the dream has come true." Emily smiled faintly for the first time in weeks. That evening, Richard was in his study, going through business reports he could hardly focus on. His empire was vast, but numbers meant little compared to the silent wheelchair parked in his daughter's room. A knock came at the door. It was Angela. She stood nervously, her hands folded, her eyes firm. "Mr. Cole," she began, "I want to try." Richard frowned. Try what? To heal Emily. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then Richard leaned back in his chair and let out a bitter laugh. You are a maid. What could you possibly do that doctors from Harvard and Europe have failed to do?" Angela did not flinch. Doctors treat with machines and medicines, but sometimes healing needs more than that. I believe Emily's body has strength locked inside it. I want to help her find it. Richard shook his head. "Angela, I hired you to clean my house, not to play doctor. My daughter's condition is not a game." Angela's voice trembled, but remained steady. "It is not a game to me either. I know you think I am just a maid, but I learned things from my grandmother. I have cared for Emily more than anyone in this house. Please, give me a chance." Richard's face hardened. His fortune had made him cautious of promises, and life had made him suspicious of hope. "If you fail, Angela, you will lose your job. I will not allow false hope to torture Emily again." Angela nodded. "I understand. But I am not afraid to try." Richard studied her for a long moment. Something in her eyes reminded him of his late wife's courage. Against his better judgment, he said, "1 week. That is all you have. Prove me wrong." Angela's heart pounded, but she bowed her head. "Thank you, sir." That night, Richard sat alone by the fireplace, shaking his head. "A maid thinks she can do what science could not," he muttered. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "What if she can?" Angela began the very next morning. She wheeled Emily into the sunlit garden, where roses bloomed and fresh air carried the scent of spring. "We will start with small steps," Angela said gently. "Not walking yet, just believing." She guided Emily through breathing exercises, teaching her to close her eyes and imagine herself standing tall, running across the grass. At first, Emily giggled, embarrassed. "Angela, this feels silly." "Silly things sometimes make miracles," Angela replied with a smile. Then Angela carefully massaged Emily's legs, pressing points her grandmother had once shown her. The muscles were stiff, lifeless. But Angela worked patiently, whispering encouragement. "Your legs are not broken, Emily. They are only asleep, and we are going to wake them." For days, Angela repeated the routine: breathing, visualization, massage, gentle stretching. The staff whispered behind her back. The chef laughed that a maid thought she could succeed where doctors failed. Even Richard watched from a distance, skeptical. But Emily began to change. She looked forward to the sessions. She laughed more, ate better, and even began to talk about dreams again. One evening, after Angela finished, Emily held her hand and said, "Angela, when you believe in me, I feel like maybe I can do it." Angela squeezed her hand. "That is because you can, sweetheart. Faith is the first step before the foot moves." Richard watched from his study window, troubled. For the first time in years, he saw hope flicker in his daughter's eyes, and that terrified him more than her sadness, because hope, once broken, could destroy a heart forever. 2 weeks passed. Angela's sessions grew stronger. She introduced simple exercises, asking Emily to push against her hands with her legs, even if it was the faintest movement. At first, nothing happened. But Angela never gave up. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rumbled outside, Emily suddenly gasped. Her toes twitched. Angela froze. "Do it again, Emily. Push just a little." Emily focused, her face red with effort. And then, the smallest, almost invisible movement shook her foot. Tears filled Angela's eyes. "You did it. Your body is listening." Emily shouted for her father. Richard rushed in, expecting to see disaster. Instead, he found Angela crying, Emily smiling, and a small miracle unfolding. She moved her foot, Angela whispered. Richard's jaw tightened. He stared, unsure whether to believe. "Show me, Emily." Emily tried again. Her toes moved weakly but undeniably. For a man who had seen billions flow through his hands, Richard had never felt something so priceless. Yet instead of joy, fear gripped him. "Do not get our hopes up too high," he warned Angela. "A twitch is not walking." But Emily's voice broke through his doubt. "Daddy, did you see? I moved. I can feel it." For the first time in years, Richard could not stop his tears. He placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart." I saw. That night, as Emily slept peacefully, Angela knelt beside her bed and prayed. "God, I know this is just the beginning, but thank you for showing her the light of hope again." In the shadows of the hallway, Richard stood silently, watching the woman he once dismissed as just a maid. And for the first time, he began to wonder if the miracle he had been searching for was already living under his roof. By the third week, Angela's sessions with Emily had become the heart of the household. Every morning, Angela wheeled Emily into the garden or to the sunroom, where they practiced breathing, stretching, and gentle movements. Emily laughed more now, her cheeks glowing with color that had long been missing. But not everyone believed. The staff was divided. The butler, Mr. Harris, shook his head whenever Angela passed. "It is dangerous," he told Richard one night. "Hope can be a cruel thing, sir. You should not allow this maid to play with the girl's feelings." The chef, on the other hand, whispered to younger servants, "Mark my words. If that child walks again, the maid will own half the estate." Imagine that, a maid turned millionaire. Rumors spread through the halls. Some rooted for Angela, touched by her dedication. Others resented her, afraid that if she succeeded, their own jobs would vanish in the shadow of her reward. Richard was caught in the middle. At times, he wanted to dismiss Angela to protect Emily from disappointment. Yet each time he saw his daughter smile, his heart wavered. One evening, as he stood by the piano, Richard confided in his lawyer. "Mr. Crane, do you think I am a fool for allowing this?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "You are a desperate father, not a fool. But remember, Mr. Cole, you made a promise. If the maid succeeds, she has a legal claim to half of your property." Richard frowned. "I would give the world for my daughter to walk. But half of everything I built, to a maid." Unseen, Angela passed by the door and overheard. The words pierced her like knives. But she whispered to herself, "I am not here for the money. I am here for Emily." The turning point came on a crisp morning in April. The mansion garden was alive with blooming tulips. Angela knelt beside Emily, holding her hands firmly. "Today, I want you to try harder than before," Angela said softly. "Not just a twitch. Try to lift your leg, even a little." Emily bit her lip, fear and determination mixing on her young face. She closed her eyes, breathing as Angela had taught her. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, shakily, her right leg lifted an inch off the wheelchair's footrest. Angela gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Emily, you did it?" Emily's eyes flew open. She looked down at her leg, trembling from the effort, but moving. She screamed with joy, "Daddy!" Richard rushed out into the garden, his heart hammering. When he saw his daughter's leg lifted, his breath caught in his chest. She moved it," Richard whispered, as if afraid the moment would vanish if spoken too loudly. The staff gathered at the windows, stunned into silence. Some crossed themselves in disbelief. Others whispered, "Impossible." Richard dropped to his knees beside Emily, his strong hands trembling as he touched her leg. "Sweetheart, you are waking up." Emily laughed through her tears. "I told you, Daddy," Angela said. "My legs were only asleep, for the first time in years." Richard embraced both his daughter and the maid who had made her believe again. But deep inside, fear still lingered. What if this miracle does not last? Richard's doubt grew as quickly as Emily's progress. Though he could not deny what his eyes had seen, his mind demanded proof. He summoned a team of doctors from Boston's best hospital. They arrived in polished suits, carrying files and equipment. They examined Emily thoroughly, while Angela stood quietly in the corner. Hands folded. After hours of tests, one doctor finally spoke. "Mr. Cole, we cannot explain this medically. The child's spinal injury should have left her permanently paralyzed. Yet, muscle response has returned. There is movement in the legs." Richard frowned. "Are you saying it is real?" The doctor hesitated. "We are saying it is unexplainable." That night, Richard paced the study. Angela found him there, staring at the fire. "You brought doctors, but they cannot see what faith can," Angela said softly. Richard turned sharply. "Faith does not build empires, Angela. Hard work and logic do. I have trusted science, and it failed me. Now, I do not know what to believe." Angela looked at him with quiet strength. "Believe in your daughter. She is stronger than any empire you have built." For the first time, Richard had no answer. The mansion was buzzing with quiet tension on the day everything changed. Angela had been working with Emily daily, pushing her to move more, to believe more. That morning, Emily insisted, "I want to try standing." Angela hesitated. "Are you sure?" "It is too soon." But Emily's eyes burned with determination. "I am ready." Richard was called, along with the staff, who gathered in the sunroom. The air was heavy with anticipation. Angela stood beside Emily, holding her firmly. "On 3, Angela whispered. 1, 2, 3. Emily gripped the arms of her wheelchair, her face red with effort. Slowly, with Angela's support, she lifted herself up. Her legs trembled violently, but they held. Gasps filled the room. The butler dropped his tray. Richard's eyes widened as tears streamed down his face. And then, with a cry of determination, Emily took one step forward, then another. Her thin legs wobbled, but she moved across the carpet. The mansion erupted. Some staff wept, others clapped, some simply stared in shock. Richard ran forward and caught his daughter in his arms, sobbing openly. "My angel, you are walking," he cried. Emily buried her face in his chest, whispering, "Angela said I could." And she was right. Angela stood quietly to the side, tears glistening in her eyes. It was the moment she had prayed for, not wealth, not reward, but a child's miracle. Days later, the mansion was still buzzing with the news. Doctors returned, journalists called, and neighbors whispered about the impossible miracle. But Richard knew the truth. It was not science, not medicine, but faith and love that had awakened his daughter's strength. One evening, Richard called the entire household into the grand hall. Emily, now walking slowly with support, stood beside him. Angela stood quietly at the back. Richard's voice echoed. "I made a promise. I said I would give half my property to the one who healed my daughter. Today, I honor that promise. Angela Brooks, come forward." Angela's heart pounded. She stepped forward, trembling. Richard took her hand. "You were more than a maid. You were the miracle my family prayed for. Half of my property, as I vowed, is now yours. But more than that, you will always be family in this house." Gasps rippled through the staff. The maid was now a millionaire. But Angela shook her head gently. "I did not do this for money. Mr. Cole, I did it for Emily. If you wish to give me anything, let it be a place where my daughter Jasmine can grow safely, with education and hope." Richard's eyes softened. "Then both of our daughters will grow together like sisters." The hall erupted in applause. Emily truly ran into Angela's arms, whispering, "You gave me my legs back. I will never forget." Angela held her tightly, tears flowing. She looked up at the mansion's ceiling and whispered, "Thank you, Lord." True healing comes not from wealth or science alone, but from love, faith, and the courage to believe when all hope seems lost. A fortune may build empires, but only compassion can build miracles. Like and subscribe the channel for more interesting videos.